This is Looks Good on Paper, a podcast from Willow about flipping the script on traditional hiring. I'm Ian Chohan, and every episode I put big voices in hiring and work culture through 3 quick-fire questions, speed dating style, to get the habits, trends, and ideas that matter. Hi, and welcome to our next edition of the Looks Good on Paper podcast powered by Willow. I'm Ian Chohan, your host, and I'm joined today by Alison Kaizer. I'm so excited that you're here today. I'm going to do a quick intro. Alison is a partner at Golden Ventures, where she works hand in hand with early stage founders to tackle one of the toughest challenges, building the right team fast. She specializes in talent strategy from pre-seed through Series B and has placed everyone from founding engineers to first marketers. With a decade at the intersection of venture, talent, and startups, Alison is known for her candor, precision, and belief that great companies are built by great people. And I am so excited that you're here today. I know all the work that you do in the Toronto tech scene and the Canadian tech scene. And I'm really glad that you're here giving your wisdom today. Thanks, Alison.
Yeah, happy to be here and excited. Hopefully what I share is actually helpful.
All right. So you know the drill. 3 questions, speed dating style, rapid fire. 15 minutes, and we're going to get going right now. So
Sounds good.
what's the biggest hiring mistake companies keep making, even though it's clearly not working?
Yeah, I think the biggest hiring mistake is resume bias or hiring for pedigree. It's very easy to look at someone's resume and say, oh, someone solved this problem before. They're going to know how to solve it again. It's going to be easy for them. But from my experience, first of all, just because someone has solved a problem in the past doesn't mean that they're going to want to solve that problem again. Certainly, high performers are always looking for new challenges. They want to be stretched. They want a carrot that's going to entice them to join a new company. And generally, with an early stage startup, it isn't going to be compensation. So it's going to be solving a new, interesting problem. I think that's a major factor. The other is there's a bias that comes with saying to yourself, I know how to solve this problem. I've done it in the past. And so what you will find is someone will revert to an existing playbook that doesn't necessarily work for the problem that you're trying to solve. Not saying experience doesn't matter, but just this idea that someone is fail-safe because they've solved a similar problem in the past or they're coming from a similar company or role is something that I've seen actually end up being problematic many times.
I think we just are so biased towards this person has done this, so therefore they can do it again. But then we don't think about well, did they have a whole team behind them helping them do this? What were the conditions that they did this in the last job? And, is it the same market? Is it the same business, right? There's so many factors that go into this. So, yeah, I think I'm wondering, just from things that you've seen, how do you avoid doing that when you're hiring, or how do you help companies avoid that?
Yeah, it really comes down to structured interviewing, which I can share some more insights on as we get to the later questions.
Yeah. Okay. So then why don't we jump into the second one? So what's a hidden bias companies unknowingly have, even when they think they're being progressive in their hiring?
Yeah, this is one that I've seen come up recently, and I posted about this on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and it got a lot of engagement, which is seniority bias. You have these candidates coming in that on paper look quite junior. Maybe they only have a couple of years of experience or really are just graduating from school, but they actually have a lot more relevant, in particular, like technical AI experience than an engineer that is much more senior on paper, maybe a staff level, but actually hasn't been operating in an AI native environment. So you have this really unique situation where the person that is actually more senior from a technical perspective is much more junior in terms of years of experience than the more senior on paper engineers on a team. There's a bias to think more experience means more senior. And oftentimes now you have these very, very scrappy junior marketers, salespeople, engineers that have been playing with AI for a number of years that are actually more senior when it comes to aptitude.
Absolutely. I think about this, obviously, being in tech. There's just so many things that come up. And how do you make sure that you're hiring for those new skills? What are good indicators that this person would be proficient?
So companies like Zapier have done a really good job of actually releasing rubrics that they're leveraging in their hiring process, in their performance reviews around AI aptitude and AI literacy. I think it's very natural to say we want to make sure someone isn't using AI in their interview process. But from my perspective, that's almost like saying, oh, someone can't use a calculator in their math exam. I would be much more likely to say to someone, I know you used AI, or I hope you did. How did you use AI in this interview process? How did you leverage it? And I would look for the people that were most creative in their problem solving, had the strongest aptitude, and would expect them to continue to operate that way in their role once we hire them. And then certainly, as you're interviewing, really dig in on someone's thought process and aptitude, recognizing that it's likely and actually positive that they used AI as part of their interview process.
Absolutely. If I think it's just that switch of thought, right? And how we see AI. It's here. We can't get away from it. I have a background in writing, and I think a lot about like someone my sister is in publishing. And she's always like, I will never look at a manuscript that I think has AI. And I'm like, you gotta know the
You're going to have
signs.
to.
You're gonna know, yeah, it's happening, it's here. You're not gonna get away from it. So I think it's smart, and I think about like a lot of talent professionals, and we see a lot of stuff happening online where it's like, well, this job description is written in AI, and then the candidates are responding with AI driven stuff. And I love what you said though. It's great because it's like, how can they actually use it creatively? Walk us through that process and show us your work and see, and then maybe we can apply that to actually what you're gonna be building when you're working with us.
Right. And it also means that, look, there's a difference between something that's done with AI and it's completely generic. But when I use it, I'm always just taking something that I've already written and asking if there's a way to refine it a little bit further. But it's still my idea. And so, given the fact that the playing field has been leveled now and everyone has access to the tools, there's no excuse for these minor errors when it comes to your writing. And there's no excuse for being lazy around, answering questions as part of the interview process. If there's a written component, what's going to make you stand out is creative thinking. And that's going to come from how you partner with AI as opposed to just leaning on AI to do the work for you. Right. So it's a tool, same as spell check, same as, any of these other tools that existed in the past. It just means that the playing field is now equal from a resourcing perspective. And there's still an expectation of a quality output.
So I guess like the natural next question I have for you is, how would you make sure to safeguard against it being generic, or how can you encourage talent professionals to use this better in their hiring and sourcing?
The best answer that I can give is, and it's always been this way, there's really no replacement for human judgment, especially when it comes to talent. It's that person that I speak to, and I'll say to a founder, I know on paper you might not think that you want to talk to this person, but trust me, this person is really impressive. There are all these AI tools that filter resumes, and there are also all these AI tools people are using to build their resumes right now. But even back in the day before AI was really a thing, when I was using Greenhouse and hiring on mass at Ritual, we would have certain questions that we would have people answer as part of their application process. Then we would mark if something is required and someone said no, it would auto reject them. For example, do you have experience in this tech stack? Do you have people management experience? Do you have the legal right to work in this country at this time? And it would auto reject. These AI filters are the same. And so it's understanding what the guardrails and parameters are that you want to build to allow for some level of flexibility for those kind of like undercover superstars to come in,
Yeah.
while leveraging it so that you can be more efficient, especially if you're an early stage startup with a very, very small team.
Yeah. I also work with a lot of startups, and I think about just like what type of people do you want, and how can you use it thoughtfully, right? To expand your resource potential, right? And actually equip your team to do more faster until you get to that point where you can scale. So if you were to suddenly remove CVs from your current hiring process, what would that look like?
Yeah, and I liked this question because it kind of brought me back to when I first started in tech and I was at a company called Ritual. And at this time, there really weren't a lot of startups. So it was very hard to look at someone's resume and say, we want to hire this person. They have startup acumen. We were pulling a lot of people from professional services and from other industries. And that meant that we had to really hire for aptitude. And there was practically no resume bias when it comes to like relevant experience. We basically had these interviews that we had built that tested the fundamental pillars of what you needed to be successful at an early stage startup. There was one around values. There
Hmm.
was one around sales acumen, and we had different versions of it depending on the role. If you were going to be a senior externally facing salesperson versus someone that would just be internally interfacing and cross-functional, there was still an expectation that you could pass this interview and you were going to be a comfortable communicator cross-functionally. And so we were looking for people that could think on their feet, that had strong problem-solving acumen, that, expressed that they were aligned with our values, strong communicators as appropriate for their role. And nothing else. It wasn't about the CV at all. And it really worked. I think the employer brand for early ritual folks remains very strong in the market to this day. And if I could go back there, I would. Honestly, it was one of the most effective hiring processes I've seen to this day.
Ritual had a great employer brand. I knew people that worked there. They were, first of all, so happy working there. And it felt like you guys did really good job hiring the right people. And, you can tell, right? Well, you can tell when a company takes the time to do those things. And I wish we could all go back to that time. We are seeing this though, right? I feel like there's companies who are like assessments and then that's the part of the screening process now, right? Where it's just like, we have to get them through at least this much and then we go through. But I still think that people over-index on the CV way too much. And it's also through fear. Like if we don't have this almost like a calling card.
I mean, I look at a
Yeah.
lot of resumes. I talk to a lot of people, and I always give people advice that are looking to make the transition to maybe start with project-based work, do a little bit of advisory work. And there's certainly risk for someone taking an absolute pivot, and experience matters. People look to me to leverage my experience. It's not that your history and your resume don't matter. I think it's more so this idea that because someone has a great resume, therefore they're going to be effective in the role. So I would look for a combination of strong experience, but still having comfort with ambiguous problem solving, still being great with these types of panel interviews, and not just someone that's going to lean exclusively on their past experience. It's actually a combination of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that approach it's very similar to like what you were saying around the AI tools, like finding this meeting of the middle, right? Like we're learning how to integrate a lot of these tools in. We had to figure out how to make these processes work for us and find the right candidates at any point, right? Like how do you support your hiring process with better, thoughtful tools, AI, tech, whatever is coming down the pipeline, but then also still keeping a human. So, I have one last question for you. It's our wild card question. I'd love to hear a story of when somebody looked good on paper and turned out not to be, or vice versa, where it's a great hire that didn't look good on paper and then turned out to be really great.
I was looking for a technical recruiter, someone that was a generalist, but was interested in hiring for engineering. And I remember I spoke to a lot of people that were coming from these tech startups. And I realized very quickly that they were used to getting inbounds. They were getting a lot of inbound applicants. They weren't necessarily comfortable with like the hustle of going out and sourcing. And someone referred this candidate to me and said, she's really smart. She's really interested in going into early stage. She's really interested in tech. And I gave a case study where I basically said, these are 3 or 4 open roles that we have right now. I want you to go sit down and look for 3 or 4 profiles that you reach out to for each of these roles and explain your thought process as to why. And there were some other factors around like candidate funnel metrics and so on. But essentially I said, I want to understand how you would approach hiring for these technical roles. And when she came back with this case study, I remember it vividly because she had reached out cold to a bunch of engineers on LinkedIn, asked them to have conversations with her, and came with a result that wasn't 100% spot on, but it was 85, 90% spot on, along with this desire to really learn and prove herself and this hunger and this hustle, and showed an incredible amount of coachability through my feedback within the interview process. Ended up hiring her, and she was very, very good and one of the best people that I've ever hired. So I think that's a very good example of having an interview process that really tested for the skills that were required and digging into thought process and strategic problem solving, as opposed to relying on someone that on paper came from tech hiring and, at a startup and therefore would have been like the perfect person. And in this case, it really worked out.
Absolutely. And the last podcast with Nuge that we posted, he spoke about like that passion, right? Those are like the things that you can't really measure with some of these other things. Like, so when you think about what you're talking about with like the hiring process for Ritual and the assessments and these softer skills, right? Giving case studies and giving them an opportunity to show up in that way. And maybe they just have like a hunger, right? You think like give them an opportunity, give people an opportunity to show that, right? So give people a chance to do that and show those more human skills. And I love stories of that because I myself have actually, I run marketing teams, but I actually don't have a marketing degree. And I talk a lot about this in some of the different podcasts I do, but it's so interesting. Would somebody have given me a chance? Would I have gone through any of these filters if I didn't have it, right? But these are the things that we should be looking for. People who are excited about the work they do, that will bring something to the company and help us push it forward.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And that's where that values element becomes so important. Looking for someone that wants to run through walls, that has that problem solving aptitude, that has that ownership mentality, all those amazing early stage startup things. But that's a conversation for another day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Allison. Those were all my questions. You did an amazing job. Thank you for your wisdom and your energy. I am so excited for the world to hear this.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining me on Looks Good on Paper, powered by Willow. If today's 3-question sprint gave you something new to think about, hit subscribe and share with your network, because in hiring, and really in life, it's never just about what looks good on paper.